of the country are you in?
Yeah, the southern part of the country, southmost, you can say.
Oh,
Yeah, we're close to Hyderabad.
oh, okay, all right. Because I visited studios there. I have a friend who works in Hyderabad.
Oh, okay. That's nice.
There's a lot of animation studios in
So
Hyderabad.
a lot of animation happens in Hyderabad?
Yeah, yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. Especially 3D, like CG animation and video games. Yeah.
Oh, that's great to hear. That's the first I'm hearing.
Really? Oh, yeah. It's
Yeah.
a lot of studios there. There's several. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yosis Entertainment. That's just a couple.
And they do work globally?
Yes,
Oh, that's really nice. Are you getting some background noise?
I'm hearing banging. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Those are some crackers. This is Diwali is a festival that India is
Oh,
really
that's
yeah
right.
we're
Yes.
right we're so close to Diwali, so there are a lot of crackers.
Like that fireworks. Firecrackers.
Yeah.
I thought it was
Okay.
construction.
Right, we can start.
Okay.
So, good evening, everyone. We welcome you all to the first episode of Backstage. In the midst of this new era, Pragyan evolves into yet another unprecedented form. We come to you with a series aimed to shed light on the heroes behind the stage. So, we would like to thank our media partners, Film Companion, Cinema Infinite, the Movie Universe, and Indigenious. Buckle up for a ride through the memory lane and learn what went behind the creation of it all. Today, we have with us an Emmy nominated animation director who contributed to the creation of some of our most treasured characters from shows including Rick and Morty, The Simpsons, and The Family Guy. So, we are beyond ebullient to present to you Pete Michels. Welcome, sir. Art is a language which can be universally comprehended. And on that note, let us delve into the world of animation. And he is here to give us insights into art and animation through his presentation. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Nathila, and I'm really honored to be here at Pragyan and at Infotainment, and this is an honor for me to speak with you. And just a little bit of my background: I went to UCLA in Los Angeles for an animation school, and right after school, I got hired on The Simpsons was just starting up, and then I stayed on Simpsons, learned to do all the different aspects of production. Um, Moving up, it took 6 years, I think. Then I went from background artist to character layout to storyboards, animation timing, assistant director, and then eventually director. And it only took 6 years to move up. But once I was director, I learned that I really enjoyed um, working on an animated production, especially in 2D television animation from start to finish. And it's kind of fun for me to kind of have a little bit of my hand in every aspect from design to layout to storyboards and final animation. From there, I went to Family Guy as a supervising director. I was there for several seasons of Family Guy, back and forth, and back to Simpsons, and then back to Family Guy, until a show came along called Rick and Morty, and then I went to Rick and Morty to supervise for the first two seasons. Currently, I'm supervising director at Netflix on a new show that's we're still in the beginning stages of, yet to be announced, but I hope that's going to be coming soon. But I want to give you a little bit of animation background, and a lot of us don't really think that animation is 25,000 years old, and there's actually in cave paintings in France and around the world, there's actually artists were already thinking in terms of drawing movement, and that's what animation is all about, is drawing movement. So there are some cave paintings in France that were discovered that actually have multiple legs on a lot of animals, indicating that the animals are running. So what they've done, and then there's different poses superimposed on top of each other. What they've done is kind of to simulate the movement of the animals. And I'd like to show you something little. There's a little something I'd like to show you. I'll share my screen here. Um, there was discovered a little disc of bone that, let's see if I just click on it. And on the bone, there's a little disc of bone, ivory bone, that has a deer on it. Let's see if I share this. You should be sharing that right now. Um, Although I cannot see it. There it is. So if you can see, that little image of the deer on the disc, and on the other, there's a hole in the disc. On the other side, there was a running image of the deer. Now, I baffled archaeologists at first. I thought, why is this? There's two different deer on one of each side, and there's a hole in the disc. But when they realized, like, when it's you put a string through the disc, and then you can flip it back and forth and spin it, the deer appears to move. And I'll show you another image that has that exact same thing, but moving. And this is 25,000 years ago. Now, if I play this, you'll see that the deer actually moves. You can see it kind of running. That was 25,000 years ago. So animators have been around a long, long time. But it was very limited in its scope, because this was really all that you could do with it. It was all, cave paintings and little bone things that you can spin to entertain your friends between hunts, and that was as far as it can go for a long time. But fast forward to the late 19th century, early 20th century, when the camera was invented, and then the moving images started to appear. Edison's moving camera and Edward Muybridge were early pioneers in showing movement and motion. And then, of course, Otto Mesmer and Walt Disney and Winsor McCay started experimenting with animated moving images. And if you imagine, from Steamboat Willie to Snow White was less than 10 years. Steamboat Willie, Walt Disney's first sound cartoon, it was just basic black and white drawings. And then less than a decade later, there's beautiful animation in full color with backgrounds, lush backgrounds, and fluid animation. So the technology has really sped up in the last 120 years or so. And then, of course, fast forward to 1990, I'm getting out of graduate school at UCLA, finishing up my animation classes, and a little show called The Simpsons was hiring. This was at the height of there was like an early boom in animation in the U.S. Things had kind of gotten a little stagnant for a little bit. There was, Disney had all that run of movies, and there were television shows all the way up in the 1970s. But the 80s, it was a little bit of a lull until Roger Rabbit, Who Framed Roger Rabbit, came along, and The Simpsons came along. And The Simpsons was such a huge hit, it started an animation boom that we still see today. But in that, the show was such a hit, all of a sudden they were hiring so many people so fast that they recruited to a lot of schools, and mine was one of them. So I got a job. I had to take a test, though. I wanted to do character layout. So in the test that I had to take, I had to draw Homer Simpson. And at that time, I was very early in my career. I really had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea how to break down a character, how to construct a character, how to deconstruct a character, how to make a character move and pose him. So I wasn't hired at first. My test got rejected twice, but they liked that I could draw backgrounds. I could draw perspectives. So I could draw the room. I could draw the house. I could draw the cars. But here is my very first attempt at Homer Simpson. And then on the left, you'll see my very first drawing of Homer was the test I submitted. You can see why I didn't get hired at first. And next to it, as years later, I drew Homer again in the same pose, but you can see the difference. If you can see, on the one side, you can see there's my drawing of Homer, which is really a very poor, very poor drawing of Homer. And then next to that is a much better drawing of Homer once I learned how to actually draw Homer Simpson. And you can see the blue lines are the construction lines on the drawing on the right. The blue lines are the construction lines. So you actually have to form the character, make him out of shapes before you can do all the details. So I didn't really know all about that. And even a cartoon character does have a skull, and he has bones. So like the top teeth, they don't move. His face doesn't move. He's got structure under there, and it took me a little bit to learn that. But once I got hired, I asked everything I could. I talked to other artists. I was very intimidated at first because there were so many artists that were so much better than me. I thought, how did I get here? Why am I here? Do I belong here? And how long am I going to last? Because there's so many talented artists that I was working with. But I asked questions. I learned from them. I asked, how do you draw characters? How do you do storyboards? How do you do timing? And eventually I was able to absorb all that. So any future directors out there, my advice would be to learn everything, learn every aspect, always be curious and look for things to improve. And there's always new ways of doing things. But once I got on the show, I learned so much. And as I said, I was able to move on to, I was on Simpsons for 11 seasons before I moved on to Family Guy. Another Fox show, they were having so much success with The Simpsons and Futurama and King of the Hill that they were doing more shows. And then Family Guy came along. And I wasn't able to jump off Simpsons they wanted to keep me on Simpsons because it was the same network. So they wanted to keep me on Simpsons but I wanted to go. I had an opportunity to be a supervisor, to be a supervising director. So season 2, that opportunity opened up again, and then I ended up at Family Guy, and then did 2 seasons there before we got canceled, and then went back to Simpsons, directed another couple of episodes, and then back to Family Guy when it got picked up again. And then I was on Family Guy for 9 years after that. But my role as then supervising director, when you're a director, you're directing a team of artists. So with Simpsons, I had storyboard artists that were on my team, and I also had a team of layout artists and background artists, and I also would work with the character designs, background designs, and for that particular episode. So I'd work as a director, you're working episode by episode. So if you have 22 episodes, I think we had like 10 directors, and we'd rotate episodes. So you would get, in a year, you might do 2, maybe 3 episodes as a director. But as supervising director, you are the person overseeing those directors. So you're directing the directors as a supervisor. But also you're also overseeing the design team and retakes and editing. So, the first thing that I had to do as a director, a supervising director, you have to hire the crew. So you're responsible for hiring directors, especially on a brand new show. When you're coming in to mid-season, a lot of that's already in place. But in a brand new show, you're hiring everybody and doing interviews and looking at portfolios, and also meeting with the producers and talk about what's expected and what the style of the show is going to be, and writing style guides and storyboard guides and animation guides. But once we have the directors in place, and the directors, then I would meet with the directors, and then they would delegate the work. They would have their team that they would work with, and then they would direct them and then answer to me. So my job now is overseeing the directors. We have 3 directors on our show right now. Sometimes you have 6 weeks to board an episode, and then you go into revisions and you make an animatic. And an animatic is a kind of a blueprint, like a pencil test for the show. So it's taking the drawings, all the drawings, and matching them with the dialogue, and then adding music. Sometimes with a little bit of music and a little bit of sound effects, just so that you can get an idea of what the show is going to look like. And so once that is all done, we have our animatic. Then we're working with an overseas partner because it's expensive. It's too expensive to do the animation in Los Angeles. So we outsource to studios in other countries like Canada, Ireland, South Korea, India. Even India does a lot of 3D work, a lot of video game work, kind of around the world. And then we have that comes back as take ones, and then I oversee retakes, any technical or creative retakes. So that's with our production process. It all starts with the script. So that was kind of my job in a nutshell. But the process that we have. So originally, like when I started, everything was done on paper and on film. So we drew all the drawings on paper. We did all the storyboards on paper, designs on paper. We did actually do some paint. For a long time it was cell paint. So it would be clear cells, and then you ink the drawing and then flip it over, paint the cell in the back, and then put that under the camera and shoot one frame at a time until you projected it and put it all together, and then everything would move. So all the old Disney movies, all the old TV shows, they're all done on cells with maybe a watercolor background or a gouache background or a hand-painted background and with the characters on top of it. But we were using, even in the early days of Simpsons, we were using Photoshop for like early versions of Photoshop for some of the color design. But that was the early 90s, so we were still starting to get a little bit into computer animation. It was still kind of in its infancy. But along the way, we started to, technology kind of crept in. We were doing more and more in post-production with computers and technology. But the process is still basically the same. The steps you have to take are all basically the same. So we start with pre-production, which is everything. It's broken down into pre-production, production, and post-production. Pre-production is everything up to animation. So pre-production means scripts. There's in TV animation, in American TV animation, there's two types of shows. There's a script-driven show, which is obviously, a script is written, and then it's storyboarded from that and recorded. The character voices, the dialogue, and the actors are recorded before you draw anything, so you can hear what the performance is, what the acting is doing. With a board-driven show, that's where you start with an outline. Say SpongeBob gets a driver's license, and then you go from there. They go, okay, what's going to happen? What's he going to say? What are the jokes going to be? So you write jokes and write dialogue as you go based on that story outline, and that's what's called a board-driven show. But for most adult animation in the U.S., it's scripted, but you can. I like to work on shows that are more collaborative, so you get to like, would be funny if Morty said this, and what if we switch these around? It might work better, and it's fun to collaborate because you get to be a little bit more involved. But pre-production starts as once it's scripted and we know what the story is, then we start design. Design is everything that, let's say, design is the characters. For this is a Rick and Morty lineup of the main family characters. So we need to know what they look like, how tall are they compared to each other, what their colors look like. And this is so that everybody can draw them at the same height and know that you're not making Morty too big or Rick too small, because you have sometimes 100 people working on a production. So you want to make sure that everything is consistent. And that's the basic character lineup. But each character, then, you have what's called a character turnaround, so you can see what the character looks like from all angles. And we have to be able to draw the characters from the top, from the front, from the side, from the back. And then again, you have 100 people working on the show. You're going to get 100 different versions of that character. So we have to make sure that the characters are consistent. So that's when you get something like this. This is a turnaround of Homer. And you can see him from the front three-quarter, from a profile, from the rear three-quarter, and what he looks like from the back. Now, Homer is symmetrical, meaning that he is the same on the left as he is on the right. So you can just flop him. You can just flip him around, and it's the same. But if Homer had, say, he was wearing a baseball hat or had a shirt that said something on it, well, then we'd have to have different views and additional views of him. But this is the basic Homer. This is called a 5-point turn. So we know what Homer looks like. We'd also do character sheets, expression sheets, so we know what his face looked like and how far to push his expressions and things. And that's all for all characters. Then it would also go into paint. So if there's a new character, we would decide like how, what color shirt he is, what color hair he has, what color his pants are. And then also we have to make sure that he looks like a new character, or even in backgrounds, we have to make sure that the characters will show up on the background. So obviously, if Homer's wearing a white shirt and blue pants, we don't want to have paint the walls white and the couch blue, because he'll disappear. So we want to make sure that we have contrasting colors too, to make sure that that's all on there. And once we're done with the character designs, we also still have there's background designs and props and effects. So anything that moves that's not on the background is a prop: a coffee cup, a car. Anything that a character picks up, food, a book, a magazine, those are all props. And of course, effects are in there too. Like we have to design, what does the lightning look like? What does the fire look like for this show? What does rain look like? Snow? All of that has to be designed. So it's a lot of details that somebody has to think of. What is this going to look like? Even as far as backgrounds have to be. A background is everything, every environment that the character's in, whether it's a room, whether it's an exterior outside of the house, if they're inside their car, what does any artwork behind the character, what does that look like? So we have to think of all those things ahead of time. Put my share tray back on. Then it goes to, we also have to design things like, let's say we have to design something like this, which is the basic mouth chart. So we have to figure out, how do the characters talk? What do they look like when they're talking? And this will give you an idea of how we make characters talk. It's a series of drawings that are maybe 1/24th of a second or 1/12th of a, or yeah, 1/12th of a second. So this shows you like how we make the characters talk. We match the mouth shape with the sound that we're hearing on a particular frame of film. So the A, as you see here, it's and these are the phonetic sounds that it makes. So the closed mouth is for the M sound, the B sound, the P sound, and then a slightly more open mouth for a smaller vowel sound or a smaller consonant. And as a character, volume gets a higher, or they're yelling or screaming. So E, those would all be these wider mouths. Of course, for oohs and R, lips are closed and you make that O sound. Of course, the T's and Z's and S's. This is a basic mouth chart. Some shows, this is, what is this, 9? Some have 15. Simpsons had 25, which they didn't use them all, but they had 25 different mouth positions. This is the L sound, where your tongue goes behind your teeth. And of course, the V and F, where you make that your teeth over your lower lip. And then we put that all together on, we plan it out and do the animation based on that. And you can see, once you play it, the characters talk. And once it matches to the sound that the characters are making, and they magically talk, which to me was fascinating as a young child. I was like, how do they make the characters talk? And I could never figure out how they did that until, and we didn't really do much when I was in animation school. We didn't, because it was very hard. It was very time consuming to make characters talk. So we didn't really do much of it, but it's still fascinating to see. And before we started working everything on computers, everything would be kind of a pencil layout. So you would see something, and here's an old Bugs Bunny layout from 1940s, 1950s, I think. And you can see, this is there's Bugs Bunny there and Elmer Fudd. And you can see this is a background design, a background layout, and it's done in pencil. And there's also holes in the paper so that you can register it under the camera so it didn't move around. So you had to register the drawings on top of the background. But this is a basic background for, and you can see them sitting on a log drawn in pencil, but the characters are drawn in red just so you can see where they would be and what they're sitting on. So when you draw the animation, you can make sure that they're working and interacting with that background. Now that's done in pencil in the 1940s, 1950s, and that was the case all the way up to the 90s until we started working on computers a little bit more. I started doing digital boards. I never really wanted to work with computers when I was in school, but we started doing digital boards in the 90s. Well, no, actually it was later, because Family Guy was like maybe 2010. We started doing digital storyboards, which meant we were using a program called, and you can do Photoshop storyboards. Storyboards are done in Flash. They're done in different programs, but for the most part, the industry standard now is a Canadian company called Toon Boom makes a software called Storyboard Pro, and that's what we use for storyboards now. So you can see here's the difference between, here's a pencil storyboard for Simpsons, and you can see it's drawn on paper. You can see clearly that it's pencils, and you can actually see we actually cut the script apart with an X-Acto knife and taped it onto the storyboard, so you can see what the characters are saying. Here's what Bart's saying on each panel. So this panel, Bart's saying, "Wow, I think we have our angry dad," and you can see there's scene numbers and production numbers, and we used a lot of whiteout and post-its back then too. But this is the paper storyboard, and then once we went digital, we were using Storyboard Pro, and our storyboard started to look like this. And this is a storyboard for a personal project of mine, but you can see that's actually storyboarding me waking up in the morning. But now we're working with Storyboard Pro. Now you can see we have all layers. We can do a rough underdrawing and turn off that layer. We can do a shading layer and turn it on or off. There's a cleanup layer, a shadow layer. I can put the car in a separate layer so I can move it. And then I can see all the storyboard panels in different shots here. Like this is scene 4 at the bottom, then scene 5, then scene 6, and that's me waking up in the morning. and then I can see the dialogue, and I have all these tools at my command just by bringing it up on my desktop. So it looks a lot cleaner. It's a lot easier to use. It's a lot easier to export to editors now too. So it makes it a little bit streamlined, makes the process more streamlined, makes it easier. And that brings us to, let's see, animation itself is getting, it's easier in many ways, but in other ways it's harder. So a two-dimensional animation, before you had those model sheets and you could just draw whatever you want. Well, with 2D animation, if it's what we call rigged animation or puppet animation, and it's the same with CG or 3D animation, everything has to be built and then you move it around. So for like Maya, for a program called Maya, which does computer animation, which is more just a 3D animation, there's pivot points and there's tools that you can make the elbows and arms move and make their face move. There's points where you can grab an eyes and move their eyes and move their mouth around and move their head, and then you put that all together and the characters move. And the same with 2D animation, except you're taking that, like let's say that drawing of Rick, and you have to rig it where you have to separate all the parts, separate the arms, separate the elbows, separate all the hands, the mouth, the eyes. It's all in separate layers and separate parts in a library, and that then you can manipulate those parts to make the animation. Well, it's easier in some ways because you don't have to repaint everything. You don't have to wait for the paint to dry, because in the old days you paint one color, you'd have to wait for the paint to dry, and then you go back and paint another color, have to wait for that paint to dry. Now we just have it all. We don't have to wait for any paint to dry. You just move the parts around and draw what you need. So that's a little bit easier. But because of that, you need to draw like so many more different views of a character, because the animators will need that for production. But what we do is take an animatic, and which is basically a series of the storyboard drawings put to the dialogue, and then it goes into animation, and animation is the production end of it. So when we talk about pre-production, is all of that: storyboards, designs, editing, cutting it with the dialogue, recording the dialogue, script. That's all pre-production. And then once we're in production, that's when we're actually animating. All the decisions, creative decisions, have been made except for the movement and the shots and the pacing of the animation. That's all production. And then once that's done, or that's in production, most shows now, there's still some hand-drawn shows, but those are also drawn on computers. So, for instance, now you'll see something like this, and here's just what a Harmony workspace looks like. This is Toon Boom Harmony, and this is made by the same company that makes our storyboard software. But you can see, like here, I have Stewie, and I've done some onion skin here, so you can see the different poses. This is just Stewie pointing, so you can see his, where his head moves, how much his arm moves. You can see all the poses, and then of course you have your camera pegs and all the frames. Each one of these is a frame of film. So this is the actual movement here in the middle. But you can see I have a lot of tools here too. I have drawing tools and movement tools and ink and paint tools. I have all these other selectors and keyframes that I can make the character move. Now to do this one, this is just a very simple movement. That looks like, I can show you what that looks like on a little bit of animation here. I'll share this clip. That translates to this clip here. Let's see if once I find it, I can play it. Now this is just a quick little animation of Stewie pointing. Now it doesn't look like he's moving, his face is changing, but now you can see it's just one pose, one pose, one pose, and each one of those is one frame. So he goes from this to this in 4 frames, and it's just a very simple point move. Now this is just a rough cleanup drawing, so we can do all those drawings, and that's a simple one. So that's very simple action. But then you might get more as the scenes get more complicated, more you put backgrounds and you put other characters and start separating all the parts. Then you'll start to see, your workspace will look something more like this, where it gets much more complicated. And this is just a little piece I was working on my own from an old radio play, but you can see I have all the parts here, the mouth, the eyes, everything's separated, and it's all, so you can see we've come a long way from just that deer scratched into a piece of bone on a string. We've come all that way to now we can just manipulate colors and lines on a computer. And like here, for instance, I've selected her head, so I can make her head move separately. I can give her a head tilt on this timeline. Here is the sound, the dialogue. You can see it's on a sound wave here. And I can put keyframes in there, and I can hold things longer, making things move. I can separate the mouths and make them move, all on a computer now. And I can do this in less than a day, or even a day, depending on how complicated it is. So, but that's where we are now as far as a computer animation. But what we also then have to do is that's production. Post-production is everything after take one. So we've animated the first take one. Now we look at it, we put it all together with the editor. He puts the shots together, or she puts the shots together, and then we can see it all together. We can see, oh, it's supposed to be 22 minutes long, but it's 23 minutes long. So we have to cut some out. Or if it's too short, we have to look at it and go, oh, we have to add some. So let's either we can, extend some establishing shots where we might have to add a joke or add some lines. But usually we're long. We're never really too short. It's usually we're too long. So we always have to cut something. So it's sometimes it's sad when you get to see like, oh, that joke got cut. Oh, it was my favorite joke and it got cut because it was too long. And so that's the main thing that you have to do in editing. And the editor can tighten things up and increase the pacing of it. Or sometimes if there's enough there, the editor can actually make a motion faster. If they can take out a frame, every other frame, and make something faster, or take out an additional frame. Or even now with digital editing, because the editors are also working digitally now too. Before they were editing digitally, they actually physically had a strip of film. It was 35 millimeter film that they had to go back and forth. So you couldn't really add anything. All you could do was take away something. But now with digital editing, they can add to it. So, well, you know what? That goes by too fast. Let's hold on to that a little bit longer. Let's slow that movement down, so they can just duplicate frames and slow it down. And you can change the pace of things and make things faster, slower. You can cut out something, or even erase half of a screen and do a matte, and you don't even know. You can't even tell when you watch it. But a lot of also what I get to do then is there's two types of retakes we do. There's technical retakes and creative retakes. So the technical retakes are there's an arm missing or a color is wrong. And we have to re-render that. But sometimes there's creative retakes too, or like we decide, oh, you know what, we have to change the costume, or we need another line there, or let's do another line. This one's not funny. Let's do another line. So we have to reanimate. That's a creative retake. So then what I get to do then is something like this. I'll do a screen grab of something and like I want to change the acting. Like here, in this case, this was a take one from Rick and Morty. I think we had a new line here. So Morty got mad at Summer, so I had to do a new draw over pose for this one line. And I reposed Rick. So you can see my drawing is the red outline drawing. It's really rough, but you can still see the body language. You can see Morty's expression. And then you can see how I've changed Summer's expression so that she's looking at Morty. And you can still see a bit of Morty's his previous arm under here, but I wanted him to point at Summer. So we then sent this back to the animators. And for Rick and Morty, the animation was done in Canada. So we just emailed this and said, hey, make Morty do this for this pose. And it was, now that we're, especially now that we're working from home, and animation is still one of the production, it's a production that's still a medium that's still being able to produce content during a global pandemic. It's fortunately for us that we can work on computers and everything is done on computers. We love to be in the studio. I really do miss being in the studio and collaborating with everybody, but unfortunately we can't right now. But it's wonderful that we're still able to work, that we can work from home. And of course, I miss my team, I miss my crew, I miss my coworkers. But they can send me storyboards. We have a server that we have access to. We just open up the server and I can grab their storyboards, and then they do their storyboards. They put it up on the server. I can look at them and go over them, and I can make corrections. I can make notes, send it back to them. Then the director can send it to the editor, and the editor can put it all together at his house. So we have, I think on our team right now, we have some people in New York. We have some people in Washington, and most of us are based in LA, but all over Los Angeles. So we're maybe 10 miles apart, 20 miles apart. We're all over Los Angeles right now, but we all can come together and have calls like this and discuss the work and look at the work. So it's for us, it's actually the technology. Fortunately, we were able to do that with live action productions. Unfortunately, they can't have 100 people on a set or 100, 200 people on a set right now in close proximity, especially on a closed indoor set right now. You can't really do that. So that's, I feel that I'm able to still keep working. But if this pandemic happened 20 years ago or back in the 90s or in the 80s, we would probably not be able to do this. We would not be able to pull this off as easily. There always was freelance work where you work at home, but at some point you still have to be in the studio to pitch boards and to go over things. You could do it on the phone back then, but it's not as easy as it is now. So we were very fortunate in that we're able to do that. And one of the things I'd like to show you too is the Animatic. I mentioned the Animatic. So the Animatic is all the storyboard drawings timed out by the editor to the dialogue. And what I'd like to show you now is a bit from the Simpsons Couch Gag. When I was on Rick and Morty for season 1, we did the DVD commentaries for season 1, and Matt Groening, who created the Simpsons, was a very big fan of Rick and Morty, so we asked him to do a DVD commentary, guest commentary. And in the guest commentary, he asked us, we're such big fans of Rick and Morty at the Simpsons, we'd like you to do a couch gag at the beginning of a show. And we were thrilled and for me, that was something that was like personally exciting because I started my career on The Simpsons, and here I was, years later, working on another show in the digital age, and I get to draw Homer Simpson again. I get to draw Ned Flanders again. So what I'd like to show you now is this is the animatic of that Simpson Couch Gag, and what you're going to see is basically just the bare bones of it. Where we start with and we collaborated with the Simpson creators too, so we got all the backgrounds and information from the Simpsons, and then this was our couch gag. Of course, it doesn't have all the music and sound effects on it yet.
What did you do? You killed the Simpsons, Morty!
No, I didn't mean to.
Oh God! Look at the baby one! Oh my God, Morty! Oh my God! Look at the little baby one!
God. Oh no, this is horrible! I killed the Simpsons. I killed the Simpsons.
You killed the entire Simpsons, Morty. They're a beloved family, Morty. They're a national treasure, and you killed them.
I'm just a kid. I don't want to go to jail.
Relax, Morty. Calm down. We'll take care of it. Here. Oh man. All right, hold this.
So you can see we use a little bit of color in the storyboards just so we can track the Simpsons.
Take that bag of Simpsons goo and this picture to this address. They'll make us new Simpsons. You understand me, Morty?
Me? What are you gonna do?
Morty, I gotta clean this place up before somebody comes snooping around. You know how many characters there are in The Simpsons, Morty? There's like 1 billion characters. They did an episode where George Bush was their neighbor.
All right, can't argue with that.
And of course, there's a little bit of Futurama gags in here too in the background. So if you're a Futurama fan, you'll see some of that. These are pencil drawings that were scanned in too. And of course, that's the backgrounds from The Simpsons that we just dropped in the back of the storyboard. And you see some of those more sketchy pencil-looking drawings. Those are done separately and scanned in. Those are done in a margin or on the script, and we scan them and drop them in. You can see there's variations of how clean they are. We wanted to make sure that you can see his face, his expressions, Morty also. So we want to be clear on the facial expressions so it's clear for the animators. But everything else is pretty rough. Again, we're using color to show that this is the Simpsons. You're tracking this family, this cartoon family is now they're like melted cell paint. So they're in that yellow goo.
Hi, diddly ho, neighbor. Looks like you got a spaceship in your... Who are you?
And of course, we would add music and sound effects and everything later. And these monsters were from earlier episodes of Rick and Morty. We liked them so much, we used them again.
Come back! Wake up! Wake up!
Jeez, it's about time, Morty. Give me those.
And some things have to be animated by hand. Like this, for instance, we'll animate this by hand because you can't do it with a rigged show with 2D animation.
I'm driving.
No more guest animators, man.
Now that's the storyboard of it with the dialogue combined to make the animatic. And that's what we sent up to Canada, and they animated from that. So what they would do is like they'd take it and import it into Harmony, the program, and then they would break down the scenes, and then shot by shot, and they would add the background, do the background layout, and then do the animation. There was a team of animators up there, and they would do the animation and then put it all back together for us, and then it would come back something like this. And this is the exact same thing in animation. Because this was sound effects and music added also. Oh, I forgot to hit play.
Oh my God, Morty, what did you do? You killed the Simpsons, Morty.
No. I didn't mean to. No, this is
God, look at the baby one. Oh my God, Morty.
I killed the
You killed the
Simpsons.
entire Simpsons, Morty. They're a beloved family, Morty. They're a national treasure, and you killed them.
I'm just a kid. I don't want to go to jail.
Relax, Morty. Calm down. We'll take care of it. Oh man. Okay, I want you to take that bag of Simpsons goo and this picture to this address.
And that
They'll make us new
portal
Simpsons.
effect
Understand me,
is
Morty?
done in After Effects.
What are
It's
you
another
gonna do?
program.
Morty, I gotta clean this place up before somebody comes snooping around. You know how many characters there are in The Simpsons, Morty? There's like 1 billion characters. They did an episode where George Bush was their neighbor.
All right, can't argue with that.
So the animation still isn't refined yet because the monster's mouth isn't quite moving to the animation because we added that dialogue later. So this is pre-retakes. We still have to do retakes on this at this point.
Hi, diddly ho, neighbor. Looks like you got a spaceship in you. Who are you?
I'm back. Wake up.
Jeez, it's about time, Morty. Give me those.
Now here's the part. This is animated by hand. Everything else is manipulated by parts. But all the
I
morphing,
must have used that vial before. Oh well. Let's go.
that has to be drawn by hand.
No more guest animators, man.
So then we've come full circle, and we've come a long way from drawing on caves and drawing on bone and moving things as best we could till now. We have so much at our disposal digitally that I wish I had some of these programs. When I was in college, I would have made a lot more films. I think my first student film took me 2 years to make. I probably would have done it in 2 months. It would have been, I could have made so much more. But it's such an open world now with digital age and digital technology and computers for animation. And that also leads to a lot more animation. There's a lot more animation being done right now because of even the technology in the distribution has changed from broadcast television from even movies that were, had to be projected from film. Even in American TV, we used to just, when I was growing up, we had maybe 3 channels that showed animation, and it was all for kids. But then cable TV came along, and now with the streaming, there's just so many more streaming platforms that you can watch animation from all around the world, and old shows, new shows. There's so much of it and even YouTube. There's so much animation on YouTube, shorts and everything. There's just so much out there now. So it's just a wonderful time to be in animation. And at this point, I'd like to see if there's any questions that anybody has. Is there any questions?
Yes, that presentation was wonderful. You walked us through the evolution of animation from caves to until today. And there are a few questions that we have lined up. Firstly, I would like to ask you about the current situation of education and exposure in the field of animation, and what would you suggest to someone who wishes to pursue something in arts?
Well, right now there's a lot of educational opportunities for animation. Everything from there's there used to be maybe a handful of schools, even as far as recently as the 90s, that had animation programs. But now in the United States, there's like I think just in Los Angeles alone, there's like a dozen animation programs that universities and colleges have, because it's becoming more and more a more accepted art form, not just an entertainment platform, but it's much more of an art form now that's more accepted, and it's much easier to do, and you can learn so much. There's so many different programs that need to be learned now. And a lot of people want to do it because there's a lot of it going on, and I think that's true around the world. So many colleges, and even in India too. I've visited with several of them that have animation programs, and everything from where you can learn everything from 3D animation to stop motion animation to effects and effects for live action films. Because even in live action films, you have all the effects you're seeing, the crowds, Lord of the Rings, all the crowds. If you've seen The Mandalorian, there's a lot of great computer animation in there too. That's all done by animators. So there's a demand for it. So I think colleges and universities are recognizing that demand, and there's a lot more educational opportunities now than there have been. But I would also, when people ask me for advice about, well, I'm going to animation, what should I concentrate on? Pay attention to writing too. Creative writing is also a very important part of it, which when I was growing up, when I was going to school, I didn't really think about that. I thought I just want to draw funny pictures. But a lot of it is about story too. The funny pictures are only part of it. You have to know a lot about story, especially if you want to be a director. You have to know, how to convey that story, how to tell that story, and drawing. A lot of drawing. Take a lot of drawing. Because no matter what program you use or where you go in animation, whether it's live action films, computer animation, stop motion, 2D animation, drawing is the key. Drawing is the common denominator.
Right. Thank you so much for that answer. We would like to ask you, the next question is that, do you think that animation has broken cultural boundaries and is potentially more relatable around the world?
Absolutely, yes.
Yes. So I think right now we're also in the age where anime is getting very popular. And what do you think is the difference between an animator who has done work in the like normal Disney animations and an animator?
It is difficult because you do specialize. You tend to specialize in certain things, because there's so much animation, so much to it, that it's really hard to be good at all of it. So, like for instance, I don't do a lot of anime, so I'm not very good at it because I mostly do 2D adult animation. So to do anime, that would be I'm sure I could do it if I really put my mind to it. It might take a while to get there, but it's just not what I'm used to doing. But I really truly believe that you can do anything. That if you can draw, you can draw in any style if you put your mind to it. That doesn't mean I'm going to be able to get a job doing anime, because that's not my resume. But if I wanted to do an animated piece, I'm sure if I studied hard enough, and I really would have to do a lot of research to do it. But I really do think that animation does break cultural boundaries, because we all around the world, everywhere I go, everyone enjoys animation. We all grow up as children watching animated cartoons, and we have that love of animation, because I think it reaches to the child inside of us, and a part of us wants to stay that happy child, and for the most part, you'll see animation as mostly comedies, but there are some that are not. There's more adventure and science fiction also, and anime does that to a great extent. Anime is coming out of Asia. This is just so popular around the world. I mean, it's huge here in the United States, and there's you see more and more of that influence in animation too. So I think that's another cultural boundary that's broken, where we keep influencing each other. So I like to watch animation from around the world, and it's interesting to see what the differences are and what the similarities are too, because I think it reaches something to us all as humans that we can relate to, in the characters. We all can appreciate the characters, whether we understand what they're saying or we're reading subtitles. We still get the characters, and we can still enjoy watching them.
So, when did you know that you wanted to, all you wanted to do was animation? And do you have any specific memory to share with us where, or the first animation that inspired you to choose the path that you chose?
Yes, I can remember. I always wanted to draw. I just always enjoyed drawing cartoons. I think I was 4 years old. My mother had saved drawings that I'd done when I was four, and I drew Charlie Brown and Snoopy and cars. I drew a lot of cars, but Charlie Brown and Snoopy were my biggest influences as a child. I remember getting a Charlie Brown dictionary for Christmas and it had cartoons from the Charlie Brown movies and the Christmas specials and Halloween specials, and I would just copy those and learn to draw Charlie Brown. And I just wanted to draw cartoons, and I always wanted to do that. And again, that goes back to my writing. I was a big fan of Charles Schulz, and I always thought, oh, I just want to draw the funny pictures. So I never really paid attention in creative writing class, but I should have, because I didn't realize till later on that all those Peanuts characters and Snoopy, they were all written by the cartoonist as well as drawn by him. So he did all the stories, wrote all the Christmas specials and the Halloween specials, all the movies. But it was I think later on when I saw, Peter Pan, as when it was rerunning. I loved the movie Peter Pan because it had pirates in it and sword fights and pirate ships, and so that just being able to draw that adventure, and being able to be a part of that just by drawing it, by drawing those things, drawing those pictures, I was in that world. So I think early on I knew that I wanted to do something like this. I think I kind of went away from a little bit in high school, because I thought, well, I don't. It's all done in Los Angeles. I don't live anywhere near Los Angeles because I grew up near New York, and it's 3,000 miles away on the other side of the country, and there wasn't really much in animation going on there. So I never thought I'd be able to do it. So I was concentrating on illustration and design originally, until I saw that there was animation schools had animation programs, and then that's how I got into UCLA. But yeah, I think it was Disney movies, of course, that I was enjoying, and also like there was an animated Lord of the Rings in the 1970s that I was just amazed by, because you can draw elves and dwarves, and they're fighting, and they have sword fights and battles, and that was just fun for me to be able to draw that. So yeah, that was probably my biggest influences. So I kind of always thought that's what I wanted to do.
That's really great. Okay, since you've educated us on the evolution of animation, I would like to ask you, what do you think will the future of animation be? Where will animation be in 10 years, 20 years?
Wow, that's a great question. Well, I mentioned that you see a lot of animated comedies right now, and I think animation, even when The Simpsons first came out, people thought that cartoons were for children. Everybody thought, like, well, that's for kids. I don't watch cartoons. I'm an adult now. I don't watch cartoons. So by breaking those barriers now, as adults, there's a lot of animation for adults now, not just children. And I still love watching children's shows. That's why I got into animation, because I wanted to do children's shows like the ones I used to watch. But there's, since The Simpsons and Family Guy and South Park and so much animation is out there, that it's becoming more and more accepted, but it's still comedies. It's mostly comedies that you're seeing animated. So I think you're going to start to see, as we have the streaming services like Netflix and Hulu and Amazon, you're going to start to see more and more different genres of animation. I think that's where the future of animation is going, from creative content. So I think in 10 years, you're going to see animated horror shows. You're going to see animated horror movies or animated dramas, animated ghost movies or zombie movies. Anything could be animated. And I think as an animator, as an artist, that would be really fun. I would love to work on an animated horror movie or an animated drama, or an animated period piece would be fun. That's not necessarily a comedy. So I think that's where it's going to go creatively. As far as technically and stylistically, the sky's the limit. I think for a long time, when Pixar came along, it changed everything. When Toy Story came out, Toy Story was a huge hit around the world, and then all of a sudden, everybody wanted to make Toy Story. So now, today, that was, what was that, early mid 90s, early 90s. So now all feature-length animated movies are all done in CG. You don't really see any 2D hand-drawn movies anymore. So it's all based because of the success of Pixar. Disney movies the same. And for me, I thought it was kind of every DreamWorks Disney movie, they all look like they were for me. So stylistically, they all kind of started to look the same until Into the Spider-Verse came out, the most recent Spider-Man animated movie. When that came out, it looked like comic books and it looked like graphic novels, and that to me broke another barrier stylistically. So in the future, I would love to see more of that, more different styles of computer animation, and I think that's come a long way, and it's going to go just where you can just go anywhere with it, and it won't be similar anymore. I think you'll start to see more and more different styles of animation. So I'm excited to see what's coming out in the future, because it's so popular now, and anime has come a long way too, and there's so much more anime, and just the drawings and artists are getting better and better and better, and for 10 years from now, it's going to be just so much more and so many more different genres.
Let's take up some questions from the comments.
Mm-hmm.
So Akil wants to know, how does great adult cartoons like Rick and Morty, Simpsons, Family Guy, etc. Get passed and aired in this sensitive society?
Oh, that's a good question too. It depends on where it's shown. Simpsons is still a broadcast show, so they have broadcast standards that, like here in this country, there's certain standards that have to be met. Like there's certain things that can't be shown or can't be said. Where cable TV, where it's a subscription service, it's a little the rules are a little bit more relaxed. So you can, I think at Rick and Morty we were allowed to say like. We had a limited amount of swear words that we could say on the show, but that was it. We didn't just like, oh, you can say that 5 times and that's it. You can't say that the sixth time in the show. But with streaming services like with Netflix and Amazon and Hulu, there is no censorship. It's like anything. Like characters can say anything or do anything. And I think with adult animation, animated characters can get away with a lot more than live action actors could. Or actors or characters could. But sometimes Homer Simpson says it, he's like, oh, it's just a cartoon saying it. So you don't take it as seriously. But if a live action actor said some of the things that Rick says, you'd hate them. You'd absolutely think that's horrible. But I think, it's how we get by that stuff is just, even in children's shows, I mean, they're drawn by adults, but sometimes, inside jokes get in there, and a children's show that children don't get, but you watch it years later when you're adult, you're like, hey, that's the double meaning there. But as far as like getting things past them, there are standards. I mean, in Family Guy too, there were certain things we couldn't draw, or certain ways we couldn't draw them. But it depends it all depends on where it's being broadcast and what the distribution is.
All right. Thank you so much, Pete. I think we can close it with this question. Mm-hmm. It was an amazing experience talking to you. It was an honor and a pleasure for Pragyan and myself to have had you for this live today. And we really hope you come to us with even more exciting stuff like you have in the past. Thank you so much.
And thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here and to be part of this presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.